Everyone over 50 thinks the window's closed. It's not. I'm Catherine Whitmore, and today I'm showing you 5 boring businesses that are quietly making regular people real money right now, starting with the one that costs almost nothing to try. Business number 1 is spice blending, and I want to start here because it sounds almost too small to matter, and that's exactly the point. Jaswant Cooler was 60 years old when she started mixing her own spice blends in her kitchen. She wasn't trying to build an empire, she just wanted an easy, healthier way to teach her daughters traditional Indian cooking. Because the store-bought blends were loaded with fillers and artificial ingredients she didn't want her family eating. So she started making her own. Friends tried it, family tried it. The response was strong enough that she decided to bring a batch to a local food festival just to see what would happen. She sold out completely. Not sold well, sold out. That one afternoon told her something the spreadsheets couldn't, that there was real paying demand for a clean label spice blend made by someone who actually cared what went into it. Today, Jaswant's kitchen, which she now runs together with her daughters, is sold online and carried in more than 100 retail stores. 100 stores, built from a 60-year-old woman's kitchen counter. Think about what that actually required in practical terms. No factory lease, no manufacturing line, just consistent batches, made the same careful way every time, packaged simply and sold first to people who already trusted her personally before it ever reached a single stranger on a store shelf. That's the part people miss when they picture a packaged food brand. They picture Silicon Valley-style scaling, when in reality, most successful specialty food companies grow exactly the way Jaswant's did. One farmer's market, one small regional grocer, one word-of-mouth referral at a time, until the volume simply justifies moving into bigger retail accounts. And here's the part I want you to sit with, because it's the first thread we're going to keep pulling on today. She didn't need a patent. She didn't need a factory. She needed a genuinely better version of something everyone already buys, and a willingness to show up to one festival and let the product speak for itself. The next business is a little more hands-on, and it comes from Rob Perry, a 68-year-old in Warren, Vermont, who retired from his career at 63 and, instead of settling into full retirement, launched a screen printing and embroidery business. Now think about who actually buys screen-printed and embroidered goods. Little league teams, church groups, small contractors who want logo polos, class reunions, local nonprofits doing a fundraiser run. None of these customers are glamorous, and none of them are going anywhere either, because every single one of those groups needs custom shirts, hats, and jackets, year after year after year. What makes this particular business so well suited to someone starting later in life is the equipment. A single embroidery machine and a heat press don't require a warehouse, they don't require employees to start, and they don't require the kind of physical strain that, say, a landscaping business would put on your body at 68. And unlike a lot of trend-driven online businesses, this one has almost zero competition from anyone chasing viral growth, because nobody builds a TikTok following around custom polos for a plumbing company's summer barbecue. That's exactly why it stays profitable. There's no algorithm to outsmart, no ad platform bidding war to win. Just steady local relationships with the same handful of organizations, ordering shirts and jackets year after year. Perry's own words stuck with me when I found this story, because when asked what he'd tell other people considering doing this later in life, he said if starting a business is something you want to do, it's never too late. And notice what he didn't say. He didn't say you need 30 years of runway. He didn't say you need to have started at 25. He said it's never too late, and then he went and proved it with his own 2 hands in his 60s. The third one on today's list is where things get a little bit weirder. And honestly, I love including at least one slightly odd business in every video like this because it tells you something important. That profitable doesn't have to mean predictable. Margot Clayson is 68 years old, and she runs a company out of Incom, Idaho called the Mighty Microgreen. Now, if you don't know what microgreens are, they're essentially baby vegetable greens, things like broccoli, alfalfa, and speckled peas, that you grow in a small tray and harvest after just a handful of days, when the nutrient density is at its peak. Clayson's business sells kits so regular people can grow these at home. No greenhouse, no farmland, just a tray, some seed, and a countertop. And here's what makes her story genuinely different from almost everyone else on this list. When asked directly about the money, she told a Wall Street Journal reporter, quote, "My purpose is to get you to eat better. The money is secondary." Now I want to be straight with you because I promised you facts, not hype. Clayson has not publicly disclosed a specific revenue figure, and she's currently looking for a buyer for the business, which tells you two things at once. One, that it's a real, sellable, ongoing operation with actual value attached to it. And two, that even a business someone built almost as a side passion, driven more by mission than by money, can still become something with enough substance that another person would want to buy it outright. That's not a small thing. That's proof that low-overhead, home-based, mission-driven businesses can build real equity, even when the founder wasn't chasing a number in the first place. And there's a practical reason microgreens specifically work so well as a starter business, beyond the health angle. The growing cycle is measured in days, not months, which means the feedback loop between planting a tray and having something sellable is almost immediate compared to nearly any other food business you could name. You're not waiting a full growing season to find out if your product is any good. You know within about a week, which makes it an unusually forgiving business to experiment with while you're still figuring out pricing, packaging, and who your actual customer is. So let's pause here for a second, because if you've been paying attention, you've probably already noticed the pattern forming across these first three businesses, and I want to name it directly, because this is the part of the video that actually matters more than any single dollar figure. Every one of these three businesses, the spice blends, the screen printing, and the microgreens, started with almost no employees, almost no debt, and almost no physical toll compared to a business you'd start in your 20s. Nobody here was pulling all-nighters. Nobody here was raising venture capital. What they had instead was decades of accumulated judgment, an actual willingness to test the idea small before going big, in Jaswant's case literally at a single festival table, and a product or service tied to something that doesn't go out of style. Food, clothing, and health. That's not luck. That's a repeatable pattern, and it's the exact same pattern researchers have found when they've looked at this at scale. A study out of MIT, Northwestern, and the University of Pennsylvania that looked at over 2 million companies using census and IRS data found that founders over 50 were twice as successful as founders under 30. Twice as successful, not the same, twice. And a recent Gusto survey backs this up from a different angle entirely, finding that baby boomer founders take home an average of $60,000 in their very first year of running a business, 6 times what Gen Z founders are able to pay themselves in year one. Experience isn't a disadvantage in this game, it's the actual unfair advantage, and almost nobody under 40 wants to admit that. All right, business number 4, and this is the one that made national financial news just last week, because the numbers are so specific and so well documented. Rob Smith is 58 years old. He spent 35 years working at an engineering and construction company, eventually becoming a vice president there. By late 2024, Smith and his wife Deanna sat down and ran the numbers and realized they had a net worth of about $5.5 million, $4 million of it sitting in investment accounts. By almost any measure, the man could have retired comfortably that day and never worked again. But he said something that I think a lot of people your age feel and don't say out loud. Retirement didn't actually suit his lifestyle. His hobbies, mainly travel and golf, weren't enough to replace the structure and the routine that had defined his working life for 3.5 decades. So instead of quietly investing another $400,000 into the stock market, Smith took that same amount, $430,000 specifically, and became a franchisee of a company called Back Nine Golf, an indoor golf simulator business. He opened his location in Keller, Texas in September of 2025. Now here's what makes this particular business model so smart for someone at his stage of life. Members access the facility using an emailed passcode 24 hours a day, which means Smith doesn't have to staff the building around the clock or grind through the kind of daily operational hustle that, say, a restaurant would demand from him. And the results came fast. The business was profitable within its very first month, according to Wall Street Journal reporting. Even with rising rent and equipment upgrade costs squeezing the margins, the location is generating $50,000 to $60,000 in free cash flow every single year. Smith summed up his own thinking about the decision perfectly. He said he wasn't keen on putting another $400,000 into a stock market that maybe keeps going up, and who knows, he wanted a return he could actually see and actually influence with his own effort. And that $430,000 figure is important context for anyone watching this thinking every business on this list requires almost nothing to start. Some of these do require real capital, But notice something else about Smith's story. That investment represented less than 10% of his total net worth. He wasn't betting the farm. He was making a calculated, bounded bet with money he could genuinely afford to risk, while leaving the rest of his financial life completely untouched. That's a completely different risk profile than a 25-year-old maxing out credit cards to fund a dropshipping store. And it's exactly the kind of decision-making that experience and existing savings make possible. There's also a physical component worth naming directly, since we're talking specifically about starting something after 50. An indoor golf simulator facility doesn't demand the kind of manual labor a landscaping crew, a moving company, or a cleaning service would put on a 58-year-old body. Smith isn't hauling equipment or standing on his feet for 10-hour shifts. He's overseeing a facility that largely runs itself between member visits, which is precisely the kind of operational load that fits comfortably into a lifestyle built around flexibility rather than grind. All right, let's get into the biggest one on the list. Business number 5 is the one with the largest numbers by far, and it's also the one riding the single biggest demographic wave in the entire country right now, which is why I saved it for last. This is senior in-home care, and specifically, owning a senior care franchise or agency. Here's why the math on this one is so different from everything else we've covered today. The over 85 population in the United States, which is the group that actually consumes the most in-home care services, is projected to nearly double, from about 6.7 million people in 2025 to roughly 12 million by 2040. That's not a guess. That's a U.S. Census Bureau population projection. And separately, an AARP survey of adults 50 and older found that 77% of them want to age in place in their own home rather than move into assisted living, a number that climbs even higher once you look specifically at people already over 65. Put those two facts together and you get a service that families are going to need in overwhelming growing numbers for the next 15 years minimum, delivered in a format that almost nobody wants to give up. Now let's talk about the actual money, because this is where the numbers stop being abstract. According to one major home care franchise brand's own 2025 franchise disclosure document, filed with regulators, locations that had been open 60 months or longer averaged $1,686,350 in gross annual revenue. Not a hopeful projection, an average of actual, reported mature locations. Separately, industry financial analysis from this year puts typical owner take-home cash flow, after debt service on a small business loan, somewhere between $80,000 and $200,000 a year for a single office operator, once that office is mature and running at a healthy volume. And here's the detail that matters most for anyone watching this who's worried they've spent their whole career in a completely unrelated field. Most of these franchise brands explicitly do not require any prior home care or healthcare experience to buy in. Startup costs for many senior care franchise brands run in the range of $40,000 to $70,000 for the franchise fee itself, dramatically lower than what you'd need to open a restaurant, a gym, or a retail storefront, while the long-term revenue potential is often significantly higher than any of those categories. This is, by a wide margin, the biggest dollar opportunity on today's list, and it's also the one most directly built around exactly the kind of decades of life experience, patience, and people skills that someone in their 50s or 60s already has in abundance, often more so than someone in their 20s trying to break into the exact same industry. And I want to be precise about what the actual job looks like day to day, because this is not a business where you're personally providing hands-on care. You're recruiting and scheduling caregivers, managing relationships with families, and running the office side of things, more like operating a staffing agency with a compassionate mission attached than working a shift on the floor yourself. Recent industry analysis from this year breaks the economics down clearly. The agency typically bills families or insurers somewhere between $30 and $45 an hour, depending on the market, while paying caregivers between $14 and $22 an hour as employees. That spread is where the business actually makes its money, and at a mature office running a healthy volume of caregiver hours per week, that spread is what turns into the six-figure owner take-home numbers we just talked about. It's also worth noting plainly that a single office typically needs somewhere between 200 and 4,500 billable caregiver hours per week to be considered healthy, and a brand new office in its first year often runs well below that, which is exactly why the industry's own disclosure documents point to a real multi-year runway before you see those mature numbers. Nobody builds this overnight, But almost nobody builds any real business overnight, and this one has one of the clearest, most demographically guaranteed demand curves of anything on this entire list. So let's pull all 5 of these apart and turn them into something you can actually use, because a list of interesting stories doesn't help you unless you can extract the pattern underneath it. Rule number 1, low overhead and low physical grind beats high growth and high burnout every single time at this stage of life. None of these 5 founders were pulling 18-hour days chasing venture funding. Rule number 2, test small before you go big. Jaswant tested 1 festival table before she ever thought about 100 retail stores. Margot took an actual course and wrote a business plan before growing a single tray. Rule number 3, use your existing savings and severance as leverage, not as a lifeline. Rob Smith invested $430,000, but it was less than 10% of his total net worth, which meant one bad outcome couldn't touch his retirement. That's a completely different posture than someone with no safety net at all. Rule number 4, look for businesses tied to something that never goes out of style. Food, clothing, recurring health needs, and now, unavoidably, an aging population. Rule number 5, and this might be the most important one, your industry experience from your old career almost always transfers sideways into your new business, even when it doesn't look like it on the surface. Rob Smith spent 35 years in engineering and construction before running a golf facility, and that background in operations and project management didn't disappear, it just got redirected. So where do these 5 stand today, as of right now in 2026? Jaswant's Kitchen continues to expand its retail footprint beyond the 100 stores already confirmed, still run as a family operation with her daughters. Rob Smith's Back 9 golf location in Keller, Texas is open and generating cash flow, and the broader franchise brand continues opening new locations across the country. Margot Clayson is actively working to sell the mighty microgreen, which means somewhere out there a new 50-plus entrepreneur might be reading this exact story and stepping into an already built, already proven business, rather than starting completely from scratch. And the senior care franchise category as a whole isn't slowing down at all. It's accelerating, directly in step with the same population wave that's been building for the last decade, and isn't projected to peak until well into the 2030s. None of these are overnight successes. Every single one of them took real months, sometimes real years, of decisions, testing, and course correcting to reach the numbers we talked about today. But every single one of them also proves the same basic point over and over again. Ordinary people, most of them coming out of completely unrelated careers, are building real, documented income well after 50, using businesses that most 25-year-olds would consider far too boring to even consider. So here's my honest question for you before you go. Out of these 5, which one actually fits your life right now? Your savings, your energy level, and the amount of hands-on work you actually want to be doing 5 years from now? Drop it in the comments, because I read every single one, and it genuinely helps me figure out which businesses to dig into next for future videos like this one. If this kind of research helped you see even one new option you hadn't considered, do me a favor and tap that like button. It's a small thing, but it tells me to keep making more of these. And if you want to go deeper on any one of these 5 specifically, I've got other videos on this channel breaking down exactly how businesses like these actually get started from square one. So go ahead and check the next one queued up right after this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.